morning. It's Saturday, March 23rd, and I thought I would just take a few minutes to have some comments about yesterday's votes on the government shutdown spending bill. So the Senate actually managed to pass their part of it early this morning, but a lot of the excitement, of course, was around what happened on the House side yesterday. And it's rightly been described as something that was kind of a very close vote and a bit of a game changer in terms of some of the attitudes and membership now on the Hill. Um, my representative, or the representative from my home district, um, is Mike Gallagher, and he announced yesterday that he's going to retire. He's actually leaving in a few weeks, and that'll take the Republican margin down to just one seat. So we're in for a lot of drama, as there may be still more of a battle over who the leader will be. Maybe the Democrats are going to have to actually try and vote and support Mike Johnson, or there will be a different kind of solution and some kind of power sharing. No one really knows. We'll see what it looks like. I want you putting what you're seeing in the news in the context of the course that we're in. What we're seeing today is a lot of comments about how razor thin the victory was on the House side. And the vote was 286 to 134, which might not appear to be razor thin. But that's a pretty close call, because this was something that had to happen under suspension of the rules. Under suspension of the rules, it didn't go through the normal committee process. In fact, no major legislation is these days. And they are playing ping pong between the House and the Senate. We're not going to, conference committees anymore, and so forth. So under suspension of the rules, why is that a relatively close victory? Well, if it's 286 of those who are actually voting, it's a very narrow victory indeed. But I want you to resist the simple narrative about how this was razor thin, or even a tremendously close call. It wasn't. And as we've talked about, I've been a little bit of a hobby horse the last week or so, watching people go after Jeff Jackson from North Carolina. I think because they don't understand how voting works, or the multiple forces that go into it. He's getting absolutely pilloried, and yet he's been more open and honest than any member of Congress I've ever seen in talking about the calculus of voting. I didn't even look to see how Jeff Jackson voted on this one yesterday, and that's not my point here today. It's really to remind you all in the course that voting happens over time. Maybe it's a 5-minute vote or a 10-minute vote, or it can get extended beyond. But there is a sequence, and when one begins voting, they look up at the board for their cue givers most of the time, seeing where's the party leadership, where's my committee leadership, where are the people who I know are experts in this area. Every member will have a list of exemplars, people who they have as stand-ins for their thinking of these things. So it's not as simple as do what my constituents are telling me to do. Also, of course, remember that vote members have multiple conflicting signals. If you're in a district that has heterogeneous sources of preferences, so you're going to get signals from all kinds of different places. There are also times when you're going to want to be a trustee as opposed to simply being a delegate. It's absolutely the fact that most of the time, the leadership or those who are early to vote have way more information that's not necessarily public. And they can't be summarized very simply. When you simply look at the final vote totals, you're missing the most important parts of it, which is, how did this get to the floor? Who's behind it? When you're voting and you have 5-10 minutes to vote, you also have to think about every vote as part of a string of votes, a story that you've been telling. And as you remember from midterm, that's all part of the approach that we think about in John Kingdon's work. But if you also remember at the very beginning of the semester, I asked you to think about that old bit of advice that has been passed on to members of legislatures for years and years. It is, when in doubt, wait and vote on the losing side. Why does that even make sense? Well, when in doubt means I'm not getting a clear signal how I should vote here. Uh, or I know it's the right thing to do to vote yes, but my constituents might not believe it, so I don't want to get punished for it. When in doubt, wait and vote on the losing side. And the votes that we saw yesterday on the House are just yet another example of that happening. And I want to underscore that um, that this is an example of why we shouldn't be paying super close attention to vote totals and, pillaring people like Jeff Jackson for their final votes on a much more complicated story. So these are the votes from yesterday. Remember, you need a 2/3 majority to pass. There are 3 vacancies already in the House, and well, now as of today, there are 4, and there are going to be more soon. But of those who were actually eligible to vote yesterday, by the time you get to 75 yays, you're looking at 75% voted yes. So you're over the 67% threshold. You're way over it. When you get to 150 yays, 77% of folks have voted for it. By this point, it's pretty clear it's going to pass. Here we are at 200 yays and 76 again. 76% have actually voted to pass it. It's again yesterday's spending bill. Here we are at 250 yays, and it's well over the threshold in terms of the expected vote. 73%, much higher than the 67% I think we're going to need. But when we look at the final outcomes, where are we? Well, at 280, 280 ends up looking like the final moment because of those who ultimately vote, which is 420 actually voted, 280 is the bare minimum. But of those who had voted at that moment, you have 73% who voted. Notice time had expired long before. So people were waiting to see what happens when you get to 280. And in the minutes to pass after that, the final vote total went to 286 against 134. What's important to notice is if the vote was essentially over at 280, and when they finally tally this, they are 286 in favor. Of the 35 members who voted after that pivot point, only 17% voted yes. So 83% voted no. And that's a perfectly reasonable and understandable thing. Because when in doubt, meaning I'm getting conflicting signals here, wait and vote on the losing side. Please don't look at the last vote totals and from that infer that accurately reflects underlying preferences of the members or is an accurate reflection of where the constituents necessarily wanted them to be. Members have to think about their long-term string of votes. And this kind of dynamic played out over time is common. It's also really reasonable, rational, and if you were a conflicted legislator, city council, state house, Congress, this is what I would expect from you as well. All right, we're done for now. I will see you in class on Tuesday, legislating and the popular will. Thanks.